In this chapter we will analyze position which arises after bishop c5 and in main tabia now move h6 with the idea of knight h5. So just to repeat once more, after bishop c4, bishop c5, castle, knight f6, d3, d6, c3, a6, rook e1, bishop a7, bishop b3, castle, h3, and now h6. The idea of this move is to play knight h5, and the move this again prevents bishop g5. So typical reaction is knight bd2, knight h5, knight f1, queen f6. This whole line used to be a main line before a couple of years, but now white, the practice has shown that white has good chances to obtain advantage. Bishop e3. Here black has a couple of options. The main move is knight f4. He can also play bishop e6, d4, e takes d4, c d4, bishop b3, a takes b3. White cannot take with queen because pawn on d4 is hanging, and now after a takes b3 it may look that this pawn structure is not so great for white, which is true, but the a file is open for his rook and also c file, and white has control in the center, which is very important at the moment. So rook e8, rook a4. This is a very strong move. White indirectly defends pawn on e4, and after rook e4, d5, rook a4. Now white wins material with a very strong move, d takes c6, threatening to take on b7 and threatening to take a rook. Black's only move is rook b4, because if he plays bishop takes e3, after c takes b7, bishop f2 check, king f2, rook b8, b takes a4, white is piece up. Instead, after rook b4, c takes b7, rook b7, queen d5, double attack, rook on b7 and knight on h5, and white regains material and he will have advantage. c6, queen h5, rook b3. Black is trying to remove all white pawns on the king side, on the queen side, so he can have enough counterplay, because he already has 2 pawns and he's hoping to take a pawn on b2. But we will see that the pawns are not important in this position, because black king is not very safe. Bishop a7, rook a7, rook a8 check, king h7, and now knight g3. And the white next move is knight e4 with idea of knight g5 mate. And if black plays g6, then again knight e4, very strong move. And the king will be very weak. That was move bishop e6. Instead, black can also take on e3. And now it's interesting for white to take with pawn on e3 in order to prevent knight f4. And the white idea is to play later g4, knight g3 and rook f1 and start to attack on the king side and start to attack on the weak f7 pawn. This occurred in one game, and the game continued like this. Queen d6, queen g6, king h2. White is preparing g4. King h8, g4, knight f6, knight g3. Already you can see that white position is much more pleasant. This queen on g6 looks very bad after knight h4. Sometimes it must go to h7, and the position is no fun for black. For example, if h5, then g5, knight h7, rook g1. White here is better. That's why after bishop e3 the main move is knight f4. And now knight g3 was the main move, but I think the more precise move is d4. It may look that white has no threats, he just played some normal central move, but actually at this moment he's already threatening to take on f4 this knight. For example, if black plays rook e8, knight g3. Now white idea is, if black doesn't react, for example bishop d7, bishop takes f4, and queen f4 is losing queen instantly. After knight h5, this knight attacks queen and he's controlling f6 square, while this knight controls g5 and h4 square. Pawns control other squares and queen has nowhere to go. Taking on f4 with pawn is a little bit better, but still white will have a winning position after knight h5, queen g6, knight f4, and besides pawn advantage, his pieces are much better. This bishop on a7 is doing nothing, and this knight can later come to d5. So after knight g3, g6, black is preparing to face bishop f4 with queen f4 because white doesn't have any more knight h5, but still bishop f4 is a very strong move. Because after queen f4, knight f5, this is a typical motive that you should remember in this type of position, because after black takes this knight with bishop or with pawn, white will play g3 and trap queen again. So bishop f5, g3. The queen has nowhere to go, so black needs to sacrifice queen. Queen e4, rook e4, bishop e4, knight d2. White attacks bishop, d5. After bishop f5, g4, bishop d7, queen f3. White pieces are very active, and later he can play knight e4, knight f6, and black doesn't have enough compensation for the queen. So bishop e4, knight d2. Black can play d5, but here already he's in some serious problems. Pawn on g6, he can pawn on e4, and white is not even in a hurry to take this pawn. Pawns he can play d5 or some other moves. So he's queen up. That is why after bishop f4, it may be better for black to play e5, e takes f4, but after this e5. This is a typical motive again, and if black takes on e5, the knight e4, attacking the queen, queen g7, and now take pawn on e5. And this again is very difficult position for black, because white threatens knight f6 check, and if he takes knight e5, rook e5, queen d8 check, and the next move is knight f6, winning the queen or winning the rook. So already black here is in some serious problems. That's why rook e8 is unprecise move. Black can also play knight e7, but this is also not changing too much. Knight g3, knight g6. Again, after g6, the same move, bishop f4, and if black plays queen f4, then knight f5. Knight f5, he takes f5. Now pawn on e5 is hanging, and pawn on g6 is hanging. And if black plays e4, then white will sacrifice piece with fantastic attack. King h8, and now move rook e3. If black takes on g2, then white is close to winning. Later he can put queen on d2, bishop on c2, trying to play for mate or rook or g3. So the best move here for black is knight g6, and now bishop c2 with the idea of knight f5, and later white will play king h2 and g3. For example, c6, knight a5, bishop b8. Now it's interesting to start with h4 instead of king h2, because bishop is on this diagonal and the king on h2 is not particularly safe. So after h4, white wants to play g3 and later h5, and here black has no good response because rook e8, g3, he can try with d5, sacrificing a piece, but now white takes, d takes e5, knight h3, king g2, knight e5, knight e5, and white is winning. Instead of knight e7, black can also try knight a5, but again the same reaction, knight g3, knight takes b3, a takes b3. And now again white threatens to take on f4 and play knight h5. In case black plays g6, bishop takes f4. If queen takes f4, then knight f5, winning again queen, so e takes f4, but now e5, d takes e5, and knight e4, typical reaction, and later white can even choose to take on e5 with pawn or knight, because after taking with pawn there is a new possibility of knight f6, and if white takes with knight, then this bishop is out of play. After a takes b3, black can try with g5, and here white can also play bishop f4, but he can play knight h2 with idea of knight g4. After bishop f4, g takes f4, knight f5. He still has advantage because taking is never an option for black, because now this pawn is very weak, and this knight will prove to be better than this bishop on a7. After a b3, black can go back with knight g6, but already we can feel that this was not the idea of black. After queen d2, knight e7, b4, white is just better. So let's go back to the main line, which is after d4, g6. Now white has a very strong move, and this is bishop b4. Just to understand what's happening and why this move is best, I'll show you the line after knight g3, because after knight g3 white again threatens to play bishop f4 and trap the queen, or play e5, but here black has h5, and now after bishop f4, queen f4, this move is no longer possible because queen has square on h6. Therefore we play bishop f4 immediately. Again, taking with pawn is almost never an option because of this bishop, and because it gives white possibility of e5. White can start with knight d2, rook e8, e5, and after d takes e5, knight e4, we have already seen this position. So queen f4, knight e3, knight e7, and here white can play g3. He can also play knight f5 and transpose into position we have already seen, but g3 is also good enough. Queen f6, knight g4, bishop takes g4, h takes g4, and white here is better. He will play queen d2, attack this pawn, then king g2, rook h1, create some pressure on pawn on h6, and later maybe open the h5 with g5. And again, this knight here is not very well placed. He will need to go back on c6, and for example knight c6, d5, knight b8, but here only white can be better. Basically we have seen all black responses after move knight h5, and think this should be enough for you to know, and it's very important for white to know this motive with bishop f4 and knight f5, or after he takes e4, e5, and in general I will mention that after he takes f4 these positions are not very good for black. Thank you for watching us, and we will continue.